Jaco.
Jaco.
Jaco Pastorius.
Jaco Pastorius.
Jaco Pastorius.
I love Jaco.
I love Jaco very much too. He did to bass what Hendrix did to guitar. People suddenly said, you know, there's a lot more potential here than what we're using this for.
It's revolutionary when it is not a popular concept. That's why Jack Bruce was so revolutionary. That's why Stanley Clarke was so revolutionary. Jaco Pastorius was so revolutionary, because these were guys that were the first acknowledged virtuosos on their instrument. Jack really in rock and roll. Stanley, I guess, in jazz fusion, which Jaco eventually became very well known for. But I would say Jaco was probably bass's first superstar R&B bass player, those funky lines that he learned from the horn parts.
When I saw Jaco, first thing I did was rip the frets out of my jazz bass.
He absolutely put the bass on the map as a solo instrument, and we all should be thankful to him.
We were playing and at this club in Fort Lauderdale, and I show up for the gig, and somebody says, "Hey man, Jaco's up there and he's come to check you out." And I went, "Wow." And so I went upstairs and I met the guy, and Jaco says, he goes, "Yeah man," he goes, "somebody told me about you." He goes, I might hang out for a song or two and see what you got." Okay. I go on stage, and sure enough, we played 2 songs, and after the second song, he looks at me up on stage, and he just not walks out the door, but it's somewhere between running and jogging, but he headed for the door, and I thought to myself, you know, all right, you can't please everybody. I guess it wasn't that great, but we're playing, and it's a Friday or Saturday night, place is packed, and all of a sudden, I see this white jazz bass stuck up through the crowd, like an arm sticking up a flag, and this white bass is cutting its way through the crowd. Next thing I know, here's Jaco coming through the crowd while in the middle of a song, straight up onto the stage, pulled the jack out of my upright bass, plugged it into his, so now there's 2 basses plugged in. And he just looks at me and says, "Let's play." And I'm just wondering what exactly is going on here. Here's Jaco standing beside me on a stage, never mind the fact that he wasn't invited. He just came up on stage and started playing. He looks at me and says, "Let's play." Now Duffy Jackson, the leader of the band and the drummer, how shall I say it, Duffy likes to be the center of attention, and he won't argue that. So all of a sudden the spotlight shifted over on Jaco. You know, he was a legend down there. People saw him on stage. Everybody's looking at Jaco, which meant they were looking at me too, and we just started playing, and Duffy got up from his drums, and he walked to the door and walked down, and I later found out got in his car and split. So Jaco and I are sitting there, and there's no drummers there. Jaco moves around, starts playing drums, and I'm playing bass, and we're just jamming. Forget about the saxophone player, the keyboard player, and the guitar player in the band. I don't even remember what we were, I just remember he and I. And at the end of the night, I mean, the place went nuts. At the end of the night, Jaco and I are sitting at the bar with the other musicians, the Bob Fox, the keyboard players there, and the phone rings. And the lady bartender answers, gives a phone to Bob Fox, says, you know, Bob's on the phone, he's looking, he goes, "Okay, okay," and he hangs the phone up, and he goes, "That was Duffy Jackson, you know, my boss. He just wanted me to tell you you're fired." I said, "I'm fired?" He goes, "Yeah," he said, "he fired you because you insubordinate or something like that." And here I am playing with my living legend on stage, and I get fired from the gig, and then Jaco looks at me and says, "Hey man, don't worry about it. You don't need that gig. We're having fun." I'm thinking, you know, this is how I'm making a living, and I get fired the first time something great really happens. Oh, it's going to be an interesting career. So I went home after that with Jaco, went back to his house, and it was the beginning of a great friendship.
It was my first semester at Berklee College of Music. It was November 8th, 1978, and someone gave me a ticket to see a band called Weather Report. And I hadn't really heard of them. So I went and saw this band, Weather Report, and it was on the 830, the year they did the 830 album. And you know, I saw Jaco a number of times during his lifetime in various states of, you know, of his life, and I've met his family, and you know, but that first night when I saw him, I just literally can just get goosebumps thinking about it, just what he did to the bass and did to me, just seeing him destroy the boundaries and be such an amazing musician. And first guy obviously I saw really play fretless, to that degree and use harmonics, and just seemed to me like just total communication with what he was doing. And it was just, you know, for me, he was just the greatest that ever was and ever will be.
Yeah, guys like Jamerson, Larry Graham, even Louis Johnson, Bootsy, Stanley Clarke, Jocko, these guys have changed the course of bass playing and music itself. Anyone that plays bass is going to be affected by those people, whether they've ever heard of them or not.
Oh, Larry Graham changed my life. Changed my life when I heard him play, because no one was thumbing back then. And as Larry explained it, probably everybody knows the story, he was playing with his mom in the church, and there was no drummer. So he had to get some kind of rhythm behind it, because I know that gospel piano was wailing, and he had to somehow come with his thumb together. When I saw Larry do that, man, I couldn't believe what he was doing, because prior to him, you know, the bass was, you know, and double stops. And Larry comes out. So I think what he did, when he started using the thumb, it not only gave the bass a line, but it gave it a percussion.
Yeah, man, Graham, I'm so much more in awe of him now. Like, the older you get, the more Graham blows you away.
I meet these guys nowadays that are learning a lot of my technique, and they're slapping and they're great. And I say, man, have you ever heard of Larry Graham? No, who's that? You know, I say, you may not know his name, but, you know, you've been affected by it.
Well, obviously, Larry Graham, James Jamerson, Jerry Jamot is like my favorite now. Willie Weeks. Willie, I love you. You know that.
My first bass heroes were guys like John Entwistle and Chris Squire from the S and the Who, because they were rock solid bass players, but however, they had a more melodic approach to the bass. And then someone played me a Stanley Clarke tape when I think I was 18, and you know, that was my first foray into fusion. And
I've listened to a lot of guys, and I've had a lot of influences. Paul McCartney, a huge influence, brilliantly arranged and very active player. Very played a lot of notes.
George Mraz, Dave Holland, Scott LaFaro.
Tim Bogert from the Vanilla Fudge was a very big influence. Jack Bruce, of course, really he has to have a pedestal all to himself for me. He's the greatest and first rock virtuoso, you know, the guy who just started it all off.
Ray Brown and Buster Williams, Ron Carter. I mean, this could just go on. Rufus Reed, Cecil McBee.
Another huge early on was Tim Bogert from the Vanilla Fudge. Tim was probably one of my biggest influences overall, because he was a finger player, and that was the point at which I decided to play with my fingers. And he does the raking technique, where you play it, where you drag your finger. All the early Vanilla Fudge. The first record was so amazing to start with, but the bass playing on it was unbelievable.
There's just like 2 pages of acoustic bass players, 3 pages of electric bass players, you know.
Otil Burbridge. Otil Burbridge is definitely one of my favorites, man. You know, I mean, if I could play some of the things that he plays, you know. So there's a bunch of great bass players out there, like John Patitucci. I just love the way he plays. You know, he's one of those guys that can solo bebop style, and I wish I could do that. Matthew Garrison. It's another young bass player that a lot of people may not know about yet. But man, he's incredible.
Oh God, Duck Dunn, George Porter, Bootsy, Verdine White.
Well, I love Steve Bailey. I mean, I think that Nathan East is a fine bass player. Ray Brown is the daddy. I mean, as far as the string bass, you know, with the walking and the jazz and like that.
Of course, Larry, Stanley, you know, I came up in a quasi-funk rock background with some jazz thrown in later on. But I mean, that funk roots to me, for me, is where that's my soup. That's where I start. And so the bass player's in that funk idiom. But now I'm gonna throw a left field, man. I remember I was listening to the radio one time and I heard this real distorted kind of funky bass. It turned out to be Grand Funk Railroad.
Eddie Gomez, Eberhard Weber, you know him, he does a lot of ECM stuff. He really influenced me a lot. This one record, Colors of Chloe.
Willie Dixon, who's probably my biggest hero as a bass player.
I mean, God, there's just such a long list.
Actually, I got my hammer-ons from Billy Gibbons. I saw ZZ Top in 1974, and he went, and I thought, oh God, brilliant. I thought that was so cool. I went home and it worked. I freaked out, so I actually went out there and played like the day later. I was like, okay, this is it. And it worked, and I freaked out. It was funny.
Ray Brown, Ron Carter, of course Charles Mingus, Paul Chambers,
Louis Johnson, Monk Montgomery. We could just go on and on, man. You know, we could go on and on.
I'm very fortunate. When I came up, in order to eat, you had to play daggone just about every kind of music you could when they called you. And I can't be who I am without who they were previous to me. So all praise is due to them. So when you say the old cats, man, I'm just saying the experienced cats, and we should learn to treasure that more.
Part of what being a musician, I think, is kind of continually trying to take things a further step from what's been done before. You get to look back at players like Willie Dixon and Bill Black and then build on the foundation that they provided.
I realize that the better I get, the better the next generation is going to get. You know, the further I can take it, the more it's just going to help everybody else. You know, so that gives me inspiration. It makes me want to practice. It makes me want to learn more and get better because I'm just helping everybody else. And that's a good thing.
I think if there's one thing that every musician has the duty to accomplish is to not sound like each other.
Part of your tone is, of course, the instrument, the wood, how the body's made, how it resonates, the neck, et cetera, but also what contributes is your touch. You know what I mean? So here's your tone right here, and can I answer that? I don't know. It's how hard you play, how you finger the note, what you do. That's what I love about it. Tone, I think, is a very personal thing.
I'm actually trying to play a lot lighter this tour than I ever have, and that's why after years of just, you know, number one, if you hit the bass harder when you can't hear it, it's not going to work, because the harder you hit the bass, the less low end you're going to get out of it. It's like in the studio, the softer you play the bass, the more sustained and true low end you're going to get out of it. Than if you're... So I'm even working for songs like Mystical. You're not going to get any tone like that.
Once a player's played for a certain amount of time, his tone does come from his hands, and it does become unique. With enough time, you're playing. People will be able to hear you play and say, "Oh, that's Joe Schmo." I know because I can recognize his hands.
No matter what kind of strings you use, what kind of bass or what kind of amp, eventually, as you evolve as a musician, and evolve as a person, you come to get your own sound. That's the ultimate. That's the holy grail, is to have that signature type sound. And even with Victor, when we've done some clinics and stuff, people say, you know, why don't you switch instruments, which we do. I'll play his 4-string fretted and he'll play my 6-string fretless, and the end result is we still sound like ourselves. And I think as musicians, that's always been a goal of mine, is to have people hear me play a few notes and go, you know, that might be Steve Bailey, I don't know. And that's the ultimate compliment for me, not how fast I can play or if I can go, you know, big deal. But if I can go, and somebody go, yeah, it might be Steve Bailey, or that sounds like a bad version of Steve Bailey. That's a compliment.
There's sometimes a little snobbery with bass players that guys who play with picks aren't in the club, but I don't believe that at all. One very important thing that pick players have as an advantage is that attack, that tone of that attack to get a definite click and the note.
There's actually great tones with the pick. In fact, one of the first pick songs I heard that was famous was Money Money. Remember that? When Anthony Jackson. Now, obviously, because I don't play with the pick, I'm muting with my fingers. But he hit that with the man. When I heard that on the radio, I went mad. When I met Anthony, I asked him, "How did you get that tone?" And he said he used the chorus and he used the pick. So it is a percussive thing. But for me, I tend to like more a rounder sound, and pick tends to thin it out. Plectrum makes it a little bit more thin to me. But so I'm just more of a finger guy.
If you're gonna play with a pick, but by all means, don't do it like this. I mean, like some of the guitar players do. You have to attack the strings from this point right here, and it has to be down on the downbeat, down, 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 up, 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 down, up, down. You know, it's the way that I pick that my teacher taught me this, and I pick the same way on the guitar, but it especially works real good on bass. You know, and so forth, you know.
The style of Grand Funk bass playing definitely is a Grand Funk trademark. I do an octave and let the center note kind of be the harmonic a lot, and I try to mute the center string in that process. So, the accent is on the octave, and the center note is usually a hummer note that just kind of a harmonic, and I'll slightly mute it with my left hand.
I take a lot of things from other instruments and use it. I get a lot of credit for this double thumbing thing, where I use my thumb in both directions. But you'll notice that it's no different than a guitar player uses a pick, right? I just use my thumb, like maybe Wes Montgomery or someone, who uses their thumb. I just do it a little harder and apply it to the Larry Graham style, of using the thumb, but it's no difference than picking, And then I just kind of combine that with other techniques, like thumbing and plucking, right? If I know that I can go down and up with my thumb, then I know that I can go down, up, pluck. So I'm just combining the techniques.
When you're slapping the bass, the idea is not to hit straight down on it, right? You want to hit the string and get off it, to allow it to ring. So you don't want to hit down on it, because then your finger's still in the way. You have to pull it off. You just want to kind of hit it at a 45-degree angle and get off it.
Now, for me, as a regular electric player, I always lock my thumb somewhere, similar to how a stand-up player will hold his thumb on the neck of the instrument. So I always have my thumb locked somewhere, so my finger is opposing it, and I get the strength that way. Initially, I started playing as a single player. I had the back and forth. That was my big move. That was it. Not much I know, but that was my big move. Just my one. And then eventually, when I heard Tim Bogert, I realized I needed more fingers, and I went from that to 3. And occasionally I'll use 4 for a specialized thing only. You wouldn't necessarily do that in the body of a song, but just for the regular. So I just basically have my thumb locked in there, and now if I'm really pounding on a single note, I'll use one finger. If it requires a little bit of a gallop, or something like that, I'll maybe switch to 3, or sometimes 2, mostly 3.
My way of thumbing is a lot of bass players I know they play up this way. I tend to play down. And that enables me to play notes and to play the funk. So if I'm going, so what I'm doing is I'm constantly switching between the two. And that's sort of my own little style. And then I also threw in the harmonics into that. So that gave me a little bit more melody. But my thumbing technique is more on the down side with the thumb, so I can easily switch between the thumb and the fingers.
My first P bass, and you know, all of us bass players know that a P bass only goes up to an E flat on the G string, which would be the 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 frets. I should know that. It only has 20 frets. And I was listening to Stanley Clarke at the time. This was back when I was in high school. And Stanley had a limbic bass. It went all the way up to this G. It had 24 frets. And I was dying to get those notes, those return to forever lines, you know. And so I had a luthier in South Carolina add the necessary frets to go up to a G. And he did that. And he did a great job, a guy down in Charleston. And but when I got the bass back, he didn't cut away the body at all. So I couldn't reach the notes. And that's when I found myself bringing my thumb around front. And that's become another, I guess, trademark of what I do, is using my thumb as an actual fingering finger. I guess your thumb is a finger. But it all came about because I was trying to reach these notes, and I found my thumb just laying there, and I found out that it could actually do a few things. And then we found that the thumb is an effective, an effective finger. But this Fender bass was extended out to 24 frets. So once again, it's like necessity breeds innovation in a way. I needed to reach those notes, and that's what put my thumb over there.
I didn't learn to tap and do this stuff so I could play fast pentatonic runs. It was because there was music, primarily piano music, that I wanted to play and couldn't figure out how to get the notes out until, tapping on like this will get it out. But again, it's not the technique, it's what you do with it to make the music. Because bass is a very simple instrument, and, it's nice that that's a part of my playing, the solo playing, and I love doing that, but then it's just the most fun if you can just lay down a stinky, simple groove. And I guess also a thing you learn as you get older is just, to play with the space and where to put it,
It's what you leave out a lot of times, too. You want to put some space in there, but you want to have structure, too.
It's more about foundation for me and providing that low end and leaving room for the instruments with the higher registers, the guitars, the pianos, to add sort of some of the embellishments.
Music is about space, and it's the space in between the notes that make the notes you do play mean something. So if this, there's 16th notes with no space in between them, but once you start breaking up, things like that where there's space in between makes the fast notes and all that makes sense, as opposed to just, but that made a lot of guitar players rich in the late 80s. Eddie.
As far as 4 strings, 3 strings, 2 strings, 15 strings, I don't look at that. I just look at what the person's doing with the instrument. I love all families of the bass. And I don't too much judge what a person's playing in terms of 5, 6, 4, The very first person I heard ever play a 5-string was Anthony Jackson. AJ, man, was the first one, and he called it a contrabass at the time. And all of us were playing 4 strings, and I was looking at this guy with this 5 string, and then he eventually moved it to 6 string. And I thought it odd, but then when I listened to what he was playing, I really got into it. So I've graduated to 5, 4s and 5s, and 8, which is doubled, you know. But I haven't tackled the 6 string yet.
I got these really because I was exploring the opposite of the role of bass, you know. But you can also merge the two worlds with 6 string because, like, usually you see guys play chords and they play way up here, you know, but I can play, since it's a 6 string, I can go 2 octaves down and still get a relatively low bass note down there with the chord. So, you know, this is just about chords, man. Chords, 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 chords. For me, this is my final frontier. I mean, they have, you know, 7, 8, 9, God knows how many strings, but this goes down to a low B. I mean, I can't see needing to get lower than that, you know. I don't want people to have involuntary reactions, you know. And it goes up to, you know, a high C. So I'm well into guitar range, you know. I mean, this is plenty. Plenty for me.
You know, the 6 strings, when it gets up on that high register, it starts sounding, you know, like a different instrument. I mean, I have some 5 strings that I play and I love them, but it doesn't feel like home to me, you know. This definitely feels like home. I like playing, it's like swinging a baseball bat with a donut, because then when I play a 5 string, if I can put up a 4 string, it's like I can hit that fastball.
The instrument is just an instrument. You know, the music comes from the musician. And so if the musician is comfortable playing that 8 string or that 12 or that 20 string, great, he'll make the best music where he's most comfortable. For me, I'm most comfortable on a 4 string. But at the same time, I have to remember that the music may dictate what you need to play. You know, the music may say, wait a minute, you need to play a 6 string for this. So as a musician, you have to be aware of that. You know, I can't force my agenda on the music because the music is alive too, and it may tell you things. And as a musician, you should be able to hear that. So, you know, I make sure that I can play 5 string, 6 string. I make sure that I can play fretless. But when it comes down to being comfortable and expressing myself, it's going to be on a 4 string.
For me, anyways, the 4 string has a limit, and therefore, if this bass is limited, it's up to me to play it unlimited-wise. It's up to me to be limitless in my approach on a limited instrument. I don't really feel that adding strings makes me a better player, adding frets makes me a better player, unless the music that I hear personally really calls for it.
I like the 4 string. It fits my ear. It fits the way I play, you know. And most of the jazzers, they've come back to 4 string. I mean, the real jazz, you know, the real jazz players, they come back to 4 string. The 5 and 6 is all right. You can do a few nice things, but that's I don't know. I think that's a bit much, you know. And that's just my personal opinion, of course.
No, I don't know. I feel that there's really not a need for more than 5 strings on a bass. You make a 6-string bass, it's really a guitar now, isn't it? You know, you're kind of getting into the guitar's territory, so to speak. Especially when you start having, you know, basses with extremely small strings on them, it starts going too high, and it's really not bass.
I still got so much more to learn, and don't add another string and confuse me any further. But there are some 5 and 6 string players that are unbelievable too.
People will say that the 6-string bass is harder to play. It's maybe harder to get used to because you're used to playing a 4-string instrument. But you know, and for me, this is how twisted it is. A fretless 6-string is the most comfortable instrument for me. If I sit down with a Fender jazz, one of my old jazz bass, 4 strings, I'm actually a little uncomfortable, and I guess it goes back to that old Decca bass that had the frets ripped out there, but for some reason right in here with no frets and a bunch of strings, I'm more comfortable than I would be. And I know it doesn't make any sense, but that's music.
I remember the first time I played a couple chords, somebody said to me, you know, you can't play chords on bass, you'll blow the amp up. Well, I'm already doing it, so I guess you can, you know. But there was a myth for a long time. I remember you don't ever play a chord on a bass, you'll blow the amp up. I remember kids saying that, you know, always, don't play any chords on the bass, you know.
The journey is the whole thing. That's the whole thing, is the journey. The making it, you know, all the other stuff will come and go, you know.
People ask me, is it important to read music? And I just look at them, I say, is it important to read words? And they kind of scratch their head, and I said, think about it. If you can read music fluently, just like you're able to pick up the newspaper and read, you can pick up any music book and open it up and read it like you would a Stephen King novel and learn something from it. A working musician is versatility and being able to read music and knowing a repertoire, of having a repertoire of jazz songs and knowing All Along the Watchtower and having all these roots, which have really helped my career. The more you know, the further you probably go.
The general rule is that if we're not qualified, we ain't going to get any gigs. We're not going to get in the studio, we're not going to get any sessions, we're not going to get record dates, we're not going to even join a band, for goodness sakes. I'm a real, let's say, advocate of real educational material and not hand-oriented technical stuff.
There are people that are just naturals and play by ear, but there's certainly, you're not going to hurt yourself by learning to read music, and if you don't learn to read music, then you're just cutting yourself off from a vast wealth of information and experience that you can learn and grow from and be exposed to. So education is a good thing.
If you really want to play, you know, if you have to really play to, you know, to breathe, if you have that thing in you, then go do it.
You have to be in it for the long haul, and that's the one thing that I got right as a kid at 17 years old. It's the one thing I got right. I put all my eggs in that basket, and I fully intended to do it until I drop. What I'm here to do is, you know, bring alive the sound of the spirits as best I can through this bass.
I remember, you know, starting with cello and then playing electric bass when I got my first upright bass as a teenager, sitting down and playing, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, just practicing. But it never really, by that point, it just had me so hard that it didn't. I never really considered it practicing. It was just playing.
One day, James Brown was walking out of the back of the theater, and I went back there. Of course, I'm a big fan. And he looked at me and said, "How you doing?" I said, "How you doing, Mr. Brown?" I said, "Man, you inspire me more than anyone else ever." And I said, "One day I'm going to get to play with you." And he said, "Keep up the good work and you will." Well, I did get to play with him. I recorded Living in America with him. And I went to him, and the background singers were late or something, and I ended up singing the backgrounds on that record. And I said, "Mr. Brown, do you remember a long time ago some little kid said he would play with you?" And he didn't remember, but I said, "Well, if you did, it was me." And here we are. So I'm saying that if you can think it and you can believe it, you can do it.
The main thing I would say to anyone that wants to get into music or computers or whatever, I would say follow your heart. If you just want to be famous or make a lot of money, you'll probably be very disappointed and very empty when you get there. You know, and you follow the right formulas and things, you'll get there. But you'll be very empty when you do. You know, so I would say from the very start, follow your heart and keep a good, honest heart, and life will fill in the rest.
Desire, if you have, and I had that, and I have it, I still have such a great amount of desire. If you have that, you can really excel at music. You can overcome physical things. You can overcome mental things, spiritual things with desire.
Being a good musician requires a lot of effort, talent, and character. You know, I don't know any other way to say it, but character is like, it'll get you rehired sometimes a lot more than actually how great a player you are. Or I should say, lack of character will get you fired.
In order to play music, you have to be communal. You know, you have to be willing to be part of. You know, it's not about the me factor, it's about the us factor. So I think that's naturally inherent, but it's mostly, especially inherent with bass players. You know what I mean? We're the bottom of the band. We are basically the support, although over the years my comrades that are on your tape have broken that barrier. But we had generally started out as support, so we tend to be more communal and diplomatic. Especially when the guitar player and the singer starts fighting or walks off the stage, we bring them back together.
So all the bass players, you know, we meet each other, we share, we laugh, we tell bass jokes, you know. That's just the way it is, and I hope it stays that way. With all the popularity that we're getting now, the fact that we're getting a little bit more played on the radio, we're getting to produce and record our own records, people are starting to know us by name, you know, we get to solo more. I hope the attitude doesn't change, because it's really a beautiful thing right now with bass players, what we have. And not all the instrumentalists have and share the camaraderie that we have as bass players. So I hope with all the notoriety that we're getting, we can keep the beautiful things that we have, and the beautiful feelings that we have towards each other.
Every year, every couple years, there's something new, some new technique, some new concept that's going on that because the electric bass is such a young instrument relative to the guitar, or relative, especially like saxophone, or especially piano or violin. I mean, you hear about great violinists and great pianists and great guitarists, but I think with the bass, you hear more about innovation. With the advent of 4-string coming from upright bass, then 5-string, then 6-string, then 7-string that guys are playing now, and 9-string. I mean, there's every year, like at a NAMM show or anything like that, I hear new things, new concepts, new ways to play the bass, and since Stanley and Jocko, it's just been this constant evolution like that. And I'm not sure, you know, where can it end? Anything seems to be possible anymore.
Man, the future of the bass is to keep on bassing, keep on bottoming, man, and keep on funking, and just keep on supporting and leading. I think the bass 3000 is still going to be the bass. With technology, you know, this instrument has evolved. You really hear it. You hear the tones of it. You know, you have graphic equalizers. So now I think it's coming to the forefront. And I think it will go from here even further. You know, we're in 2000 now. You know, this is the Jetson age. You know, this used to be science fiction. Now it's science fact. So I can't wait to see what the next generation does with this instrument. It ain't going nowhere, baby. The bass is here.
Playing with Steve, I am required to do all kinds of things, all kinds of techniques, which require different sound. So when I go to the single coil setting, which is my other favorite setting on this bass, all of a sudden I have essentially a bridge pickup jazz bass sound. And now my finger lines are nice and clear and distinct, soloing is. Chords are thinned out a little bit so they sing as well instead of being overwhelmed by low-end muddiness, which can be a problem.